If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettel. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today I'm joined by Noah Rolland, CEO of NeuroTrainer and Smileyscope, and host of the FocusMatters podcast. In this episode, we get into the science of cognitive performance and focus. Why your brain is always training, whether you realize it or not. What neuroplasticity actually means in practice, and what separates high performers from everyone else. If you've ever struggled to stay focused, felt like your attention is being pulled in every direction, or just want to understand how to train your brain the same way that you train your body, this conversation's for you. Let's get into it. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, cognitive performance, focus, and attention with Noah Rolland from NeuroTrainer. Noah and I got connected through my work in sport. My PhD was in reactive agility. So I studied all of the cognitive components of elite athletic performance. And when I was first introduced to NeuroTrainer, it was finally a vehicle where the research that I'd done a decade before could actually be put into a device and utilized and actioned. So it was super exciting because I felt like putting guys in front of video screens and showing them videos of of athletes moving wasn't really going to cut it. You know, we couldn't really train. So I'd love for you to walk us through NeuroTrainer a little bit, Noah. But first of all, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm very excited to be here. Your favorite topics are my favorite topics. As my son often says, you really like to talk about this a lot. And I said, yeah, it's my job and my passion. So
that's right.
I'm happy to explore it and take the conversation wherever you'd like it to go.
Yeah, that's my passion too. You know, I really start nerding out on these shows where we talk about the brain. I'm fascinated by it. So I know I'm going to learn a ton today.
Well, so full disclosure before we get started. So I'm the CEO of NeuroTrainer. I am not a neuroscientist. I always say I only play a neuroscientist on web calls and podcasts.
Yeah.
So NeuroTrainer was founded by a neuroscientist, Jeff Nyquist, and had some brilliant ideas and really made this bold move. To give the quick background story, Jeff really, I think, had the vision to leap into VR very early. He was an early VR adopter. And when we look at it now, it seems very logical that VR is the place to train the brain. As you mentioned, there's lots of different brain training tools. When NeuroTrainer first started 7+ years ago, there really weren't. We were very early in the space.
Yeah.
There were brain games, and I actually met the Lumosity guys when they first started, which maybe we'll get to as the conversation unravels. But brain games are very different. Brain games are rote activities that make you feel like you're doing something, and they tend to be somewhat pleasurable because you think you're going to remember where you put your keys better, and they have their place. But the idea of actually training the brain, the idea of being able to leverage ideas like neuroplasticity to evoke long-term permanent change and higher levels of functioning meant that we were going to have to figure out a way to capture somebody's complete attention for an extended period of time, stress their brains in very positive ways. And to Jeff's credit, VR is the vehicle for doing that. So I believe we were the first VR-based brain training company. Others have come along since that. And when we first started, we were very focused on pro sports, and that's how we met. I was not part of the founding team of NeuroTrainer. I joined early on and then slowly progressed into my role. Quick funny story. As I say, I'm not a neuroscientist. I was an English lit major. And Jeff and I met through one of these off connections learned that he was looking for executive leadership, but it turned out we lived in San Francisco or in Marin County, about 7 miles from one another. Let's get together for coffee, as these conversations often start. Now, my background had been in human performance, parallel to yours, but really in the health club space. Worked in some very elite training centers, had a wonderful opportunity to work for TRX, running training and programming there for several years, but most of it from the neck down. And I had always been fascinated from the neck up. And I've always believed that this is the final frontier of human performance across the board. So Jeff and I are talking, and we seem to be connecting in interesting ways. We're in a cafe in Mill Valley. And then he reaches under the table and he said, well, you want to try it? And he pulls out a headset. And I'm from Jersey. I'll do anything. I'm like, yeah, let's go. And so that was the start. And so very focused on sports. We still serve some great sports customers. Since then, we've evolved in several different ways. We could talk about our work in academics and our ability to impact youth and their focus. And most recently, we've really been leaning into the DoD. And so now we work with special forces operators. We work with combat pilots. And so the beauty of what we do is I do care, but I don't. If you're a 16-year-old athlete or you're a 35-year-old combat pilot, you still have a brain. It's fundamentally the same. And so there's this universality to what we do that's actually kind of amazing.
So lots and lots to unpack there.
No, that's it. We're done. Nice show. Yeah,
Thanks for coming, everybody. So this concept that everybody has a brain, and by and large, they work the same within a couple of standard deviations, probably. That's how we approach the physical aspect, neck down, right? Same with all the pro athletes. I do many of the same workouts with my 80-year-old women as I would with my NBA stars. The outputs look a little different.
Yeah, the loads might be different. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But everybody needs to move and function in space.
Right.
And that's really why I want to have this conversation, because as I said, what I found in my PhD research, exactly as you said, elite performance happens from the neck up. What we measured was essentially what separates elite from sub-elite performers. And we were able to parse out the physical parts of movements from the cognitive components. So we had reaction time, and then we had a physical response time. And you could parse that out when you looked at the video, and we had a big screen with an athlete moving on the video. We could see the athlete move on the video, and then the athlete move in real person. So we took that to be response time. And what we found was that the elite movers were the ones from the neck up that could read and react to the stimulus as quick when they didn't know where that athlete was going to go as when they did. So whether it was reactive or pre-planned, it was the same. The sub-elite performers were often better physically, but they were so much slower mentally that they hadn't actually moved by the time the other guy was about finishing.
Right.
And so that was really the difference. Now, that's the same as we come out of sport and we go into these elite executives, whether it be people on Wall Street, whether it be CEOs, all the big decision makers, the important decision makers are making fast, accurate decisions and are able to focus over time.
Yes. I think there's some nuances there. Yeah. I think there are some nuances there.
Which is why you're here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think of myself as an athlete, never at a super elite level, but I've been athletic my whole life. I continue to practice martial arts. I currently practice Filipino martial arts. I practice Arnis for largely cognitive reasons, interestingly enough. And I think that, there's the famous Wayne Gretzky quote that, Wayne, how are you so good on the ice? And how are you always in the right place at the right time? And you can correct me because this is your domain and not mine. But his answer was basically, people are chasing the puck and I go where the puck's going to be.
Exactly. Yes.
And so it's this concept of a very, very highly developed athlete is using perception skills and not allowing their prefrontal cortex to get in the way of their ability to perceive an environment and react to stimulus that they understand. And so I think that's an example of the kind of 1% of cognitive function that requires a tremendous amount of work in order to improve and change.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it's long conditioning. You don't get that from playing Sudoku.
Well, and so that's when we looked at this, there was knowledge of situations, and knowledge of performance. So that's the 10,000 hours, whatever that figure might actually be.
That's your rep time.
But when you've watched 10,000 hours of hockey, you just sort of know where the puck's going to go.
That's right.
Right. That's right. It's like the software, right? Versus the actual hard wiring.
Right.
Because the same reason that Jordan went from being Jordan with the Bulls to being a AAA baseball player. Because he didn't have the schema built up to read where that pitch was going to go.
Right.
So he couldn't hit in baseball. He wasn't the greatest athlete there.
Right.
So
but it would have been interesting. He's a great example, because if we could have put eye tracking software on him, if we could have put EEG sensing software on him, was he picking up the pitch faster than anyone else? But he just didn't have the motor coordination skills and the 10,000 hours in order to activate the physical process that would catch up to his cognitive process.
I would argue, based on my research, it was the cognitive.
Interesting.
He did not have the visual scanning strategy to read that pitch. What we found was that elite performers are actually anticipating. When they're 50% sure where it's going, they've started swinging. And they're making corrections along the way. He's waiting until he's seen the ball, and then he's swinging at the ball.
Interesting. Yeah.
It is my take on it.
Yet on the court, he had the ability to read the court and respond to the court in a way that I don't know anybody else ever has.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So hardware and software are now aligned.
Yes. Hardware, software are aligned. And then there also, it gets us in a side conversation around transfer, around this question of, if I train for a specific task, do I only get better at that task? Or is there transfer that extends beyond the task? Because that's a question that surfaces for us all the time. In our work, one of the most common questions people ask us is, how do we know this is going to work? And how do we know that this is going to transfer out onto the field? And I'm happy to answer that, because I always answer it. I
have thoughts. Let's go ahead. Because
I'll take my pass, and then we'll compare notes. So I try to make it very clear up front. So in the world of transfer, for those who don't get pulled into this conversation regularly, there's really three different levels, but mostly we talk about near and far transfer. Near transfer is, if I do this thing, am I going to get better at the thing? And then far transfer is, if I do this thing, do I get better at associated things? Yeah. What people are asking us when they're talking to NeuroTrainer is, how do I know that working these neurocognitive skills inside this VR environment, which I understand is hard and very challenging, and I see there's a lot of decision making, there's a lot of reaction time, there's a lot of these components that make sense to me, are going to improve athleticism. Yeah. How do I know it's going to make me a better soccer player, for example? And my answer is, you don't. Like, let's be really clear.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't make you a better soccer player. What we're doing is we are increasing your potential to access your physical skills. And so if that is your gap, if you have tremendous physical skills in your sport, but you can't read the scenario correctly, or you make decisions too slowly, or you start to slow down under pressure, well, we can address all those things. We can also address the question of, how long does it take you to ramp up to peak performance, which has become a very big topic for us, this concept of cognitive priming. But what I explain over and over again is, if you can't swing a bat, it's not going to make you a tremendous hitter.
Right. And for me, that transfers in the sports world into what is general preparation versus specific preparation.
Sure.
So doing squats, does that make you a better basketball player?
Well,
does it make you a faster runner? Like, indirectly, yes, because it becomes specific. You give them again, potential. You give them the traits and that will allow the expression.
Yes.
At a higher level.
And I'm glad you bring up squats because it's so interesting. I use a lot of physical training metaphors because that's what people understand. The cognitive is still brand new. I mean, it's really an emerging field, neuroscience and neurocognitive. And so we'll talk about that and it parallels in so many different ways. One of them is also the whole question of time under tension. So a common question we'll get is, well, how much of this do I have to do? It's a wonderful question. And the caveat that follows right afterwards is because we don't have any time, right? I've never had a team come to us and say, we have so much downtime with our players. We're just looking for something to fill all this downtime.
Searching for something.
Right? Something. We were going to try, video games, but we thought we'd try this. So we're always fighting for time. And so we start very modestly and we'll say, if we can get 7 minutes 3 times a week, that's a realistic starting point. We're going to build from there. But it is so interesting that you pick your sport and they're going to still work their strength and conditioning fairly consistently. I've heard some of your podcasts where you talk about not everybody shows up, but it's scheduled, right? It's scheduled time. It's protected time.
Right.
Yet, if you really were to push on an athlete, how do you know that squats make you better at baseball? They would not have an answer.
Right.
And yet they're not going to miss those physical trainings. So it's a question of how much are you willing to give in order to see change? So when I ask, can we get 7 minutes 3 times a week? I said, but let me just call it out real clearly. If you were going to strength train 7 minutes 3 times a week, would you expect to get stronger?
Right.
Probably not. So there's an input and an output that becomes very important here. So I love the analogy because we know that strength training makes us better athletes, but I think there are a very small percentage of people that could actually diagram how we know that's true because it's all about potential. It's all about potentiation.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's an interesting point and an important point because in sport, and I'm seeing outside of sport now, there is this physical bias. And there, you look at the combine.
Yeah, it's so strong. Yeah.
Strong doesn't even describe it. The NHL combine, there's a big study, right? There is not a single test being done in the NHL that predicts future success in hockey.
Right.
0.
Right.
There was one. Hand-eye coordination. They measured hand-eye coordination and it was strongly predictive of future success. And they took it out about 12 years ago. And like the GMs would come to me at the combine, Jeremy, who'd you like? I'm like, oh, for God's sake, don't pick who I like. We'll look great, but we'll be terrible hockey players.
Yeah. We'll have a great calendar.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Physical traits are entry level.
Yeah.
But we sort of know what to do with them. I know how to make you stronger. I know how to make you more powerful.
Yes.
I know how to rehab you and do your core and all this sort of thing. So it's like this sort of fallacy of control a little bit where we just put all this attention into this thing that we know how to do. Meanwhile, everybody knows that what makes you really good at hockey is this.
Yeah. Well,
you have to be good enough in the physical, and then you have to be cognitively good enough.
I think I agree. I've thought a lot about this, and I think part of this is also there's sort of this extrinsic, intrinsic quality to it, right? Okay, I'm going to go train. I know how to do it. It hurts. I feel the effort. And we do still very much live in a society, both in sport and outside of sport, where we think that reward is directly correlated to effort. Right. So I need to work hard to be better.
Right.
And yet, when it comes to the brain, when do we really work hard? And this becomes a much bigger conversation outside of sport. So to take us in a slight, if you don't mind, to expand the conversation a little bit, you introduced it earlier. I want to frame up why this is important to me. So I, as the CEO of NeuroTrainer, very passionate about cognitive performance, cognitive health, have an opportunity to work with all sorts of fantastic athletes, and very much in the Nike frame of everybody's an athlete. But when I look at it personally, last year I lost my father to Alzheimer's. And so I watched him go through a period of dementia and heartbreaking to watch what happened to my dad.
Right.
My son has had ADHD his entire life.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, probably I would have been on the spectrum, certainly on the ADHD spectrum, if that had been as popular when I was a kid.
Sure.
But I get sandwiched in between these two cognitive challenges. And of course, I look into the future and I don't want to be my dad. And I look at my son and I want to give him all the tools I can to be as successful as possible.
Yeah.
And this is all about the brain, right? It's all about the brain. And you mentioned earlier that CEOs need to focus and they need to make decisions, fast decisions and quality decisions. I think that if I step back from the sort of meat and potatoes of our work, which is working with high performance people and making them better, I always say the first thing we have to do is we have to improve everybody's focus abilities.
Yeah.
Because we know, I used to walk around saying focus is broken, right? I used to be very, very demonstrative and like, we've broken our focus and I'm worried about the future. And I don't really feel that way anymore. I think what we've done is we've allowed our focus to be redefined.
Yeah.
And to change. Now, some of it is in very alarming ways. So my son, he's a very bright kid. If we were in Boston, we would call him wicked smart. So very bright kid. And he's in high school and he comes home from his new ELA classes, his English language class, and he's really excited. He said, "Oh, I'm really excited." I said, "Why?" He said, "We're reading the Odyssey this year." I said, "Oh, that's fantastic." And my son will just like dig into the Odyssey.
Right.
He comes home a week later. He said, "We're not reading the Odyssey." I said, "What happened?" He said, "We're reading the comic book."
Oh, right.
Wah, wah, wah. Why? Because no one can read a book anymore.
Right.
We are raising a generation, multiple generations, who have a completely different set of focus skills. And one of them is not sustained attention.
Right. So, no, that's a great point. Can we, as we go into this track, which I'm really glad we are, let's put some definitions around it. What do you mean by attention? Focus, sustained attention? Let's start defining some of these cognitive abilities.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I'm the best to define them, but I've read all of the consumer literature and much of the scientific literature, and quite frankly, some of these are very hard to define. So when we talk about focus, if you look at it from a neuroscience perspective, there is no such thing as focus. There's a variety of different types of focus. Attention, as I define it, focus and attention, as I think of it, is our ability to direct our conscious mind to the things that we are trying to pay attention to in order to be able to get some sort of result. So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read this article from start to finish. And somehow I'm not going to check my phone 3 times while I'm doing that. And ideally, by the time I'm finished with it, I will have remembered what I read, right? That to me is focus. I think where focus shows up in such an important way is the ability for you and I had a conversation. And even though it's a digital conversation, I feel like, Jeremy's actually listening to me this whole time. Right. He's not drifting off and thinking about what's he going to post after this is over or, whatever it is. Yeah. And an example, so I think of that as directed attention. I think of it as focus is your ability to, summon your awareness, your metacognition, and to be able to channel it in a specific way. And of course, there's different types of focus. We talk about spotlight versus floodlight focus when we start thinking about how the brain works and some of the aspects of mindfulness. But on a day-to-day basis, what are those two? Could you
help me understand that?
Yeah. So from a cognitive perspective, sometimes we are in a floodlight of focus where our awareness is very broad. A great example of this, and it's not the state that we're in most of the time. We've now trained our attention to be incredibly frontal and incredibly narrow, mostly due to this device. And so if we're not, for those not on video, I'm holding up my smartphone. Right. Yeah. It has done all sorts of wonderful things and all sorts of terrible things to us. It's it's made chiropractors incredibly happy because it's destroying our cervical spine. It's made our optometrists happy because we have to go back and get glasses adjusted because we're now directing all of our attention to these very small screens. So that is a spotlight of attention. And there are times when a spotlight of attention is incredibly important. As we talked about earlier in sport, if I'm swinging a baseball bat, I need that laser focused attention. Right. But if I'm I'm going to go with soccer or hockey, I'm moving the ball or the puck across the field or across the ice. I need a very broad sense of attention. I need much
or if
more
you're
of a
the
floodlight.
goalie.
Yeah, if you're the goalie.
Right, if you're the goalie, you need to see the field. Right.
So in our day-to-day lives, we're living very frontal. We're living very spotlight. We have trouble getting into this much wider state of focus. Again, which is why VR is helpful, because in VR, we really start to push your peripheral vision. And the better technology gets, the better it gets. Interestingly enough, and I have to give a tremendous amount of credit to Andrew Huberman. I mean, he has really brought the subject of neuroscience into the public forum and made it cool. Like, there's no arguing it. I'm not an acolyte, but I think he's done some tremendous work, and he talks about these aspects a lot, breaks them down.
Yeah.
The challenge here is that if we're very frontally focused and we're always in the spotlight, it's very tiring. It's very exhausting to the brain. And so we want to be able to shift our attention. And so one of the best ways to do this is to take breaks and to go somewhere where your attention shifts to a much broader scope. So for instance, taking a walk in nature is one of the best ways to get out of like this heavy prefrontal cortex, sort of draining attention, and get into a little bit more of a mind wandering, let your brain go, self-reflection, attention, because we're picking up on all of these subtle shapes and in the environment that literally puts us into something.
Sunlight sort of effect.
More of an optic flow.
Yeah.
So there's different types of attention. And as you said earlier, there's this whole question of, can I focus on demand? How do I get into a state of focus? How do you get into a state of focus?
It's something I genuinely struggle with. One of the reasons I'm really enjoying this conversation is because I was late in life diagnosed with ADHD. So that's something that I've really struggled with, and something I want us to get to is the task switching thing. If I've only got a 30-minute window, I basically can't start a task. I can't get into it.
Because how long does it take you to feel like until you're locked in?
At least half an hour.
Okay, that's not ADHD. That's human being.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So how do I do it? Right. So for example, I like the Pomodoro timing and named because somebody had a tomato timer. So my wife actually bought me a tomato timer for this. So I'll set a timer, and so I know I've got that time period, and that helps me sort of shut things out. Like, okay, I'm not allowed to look at anything for this period. I use the Endel app. So I'll put my noise cancelling headphones over ear. I find better than the in ear to try and block everything out. I will close down all of the apps on my computer. I'll put do not disturb on my phone. So it's really trying to cut everything out that I'm not focused on. And then like on a bigger level, sort of the blocking of my calendar. Like I have to have my calendar very sort of strictly laid out. Yeah, regimented every day where I know what I'm doing and when. So that's basically my strategy in a nutshell.
Okay. So a couple thoughts. For those that are not familiar, Endel. So Endel is an app. It's a mobile app that creates background environments, not really songs, but background environments that use primarily binaural beats technology. Binaural beats are really interesting. They've been around forever. Like back during the mind-body movement, people were talking about binaural beats. And I think they got a very bad rap. And now they have a lot of scientific support. So for those who don't know it, there are a couple different products like Endel. Brain FM is another one. And they create these soundscapes to try to manipulate, in a very positive way, manipulate and capture your attention. So just want to make sure, because sometimes we assume people know what we're talking about, and they're just like, I don't know what
that is true.
Battle meant, right? So a couple thoughts. Let's talk about you and your focus. A couple thoughts. So you've developed a routine, and routine is part of the way we get into a state of focus, right? Routine helps us focus. Think about this from the athlete perspective. You've seen this over and over again. Athletes develop pre-game routines Why? Because it helps them manage their emotional content and it helps them manage their cognition. It helps drive them into a state of focus and attention. Because if you're going to be focused mentally, you also have to have the supporting internal level of arousal. And I don't mean arousal other than in the truly scientific sense. Right?
Yeah.
It's funny. I used to talk about arousal a lot. And then I was at a Catholic high school and the principal pulled me aside and said, by the way, when you speak to the students, you can't use the word arousal.
Yes.
I mean it scientifically, but okay. So I think what you're doing is great. You're addressing structure.
Yeah.
You're trying to minimize distraction because you know you're prone to distraction. You are actually getting into this laser beam focus, right? This spotlight focus. Interestingly enough, that's one of those examples where actually narrowing your field of view is quite helpful. So some people experiment with hoodies to actually narrow their field of view. What you're not doing, what I'm here is missing, is this question of arousal.
Yeah.
This question of, so if we think about if I'm getting ready to do any activity, but certainly any cognitive activity, if I just step into the activity and expect that I'm now going to be functioning at the level that meets the demand signal, that would be the same of not doing any kind of warm up, getting out on the ice and saying, how come I'm not skating well today?
Yeah.
Right.
So
this is, I mentioned earlier, this is why in NeuroTrainer, when we first started, we were so focused on long-term gains. Like we came out measuring decision-making speed, impulse control, task switching, and we're going to measure it. We're going to put people under these intense training environments that are just fun enough to keep them coming back.
Yeah.
And then they're going to train for 6 months and we're going to show them all of the progress they've made. And lo and behold, nobody has the patience for that.
Right.
Nobody has the patience for that, including professional athletes, which blew my mind when I first discovered this. They're impatient people. They're like, I want to know what it's doing for me right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I got to play on Saturday.
Well, and I only have 3 years left on my contract, whatever it is, right? So this idea of priming the brain became very important to us. So we started to change some of the environments and the structure. And so if we think about this idea of an arousal curve, if I am too low on the arousal curve, I will not be able to focus. We'll assume we're doing something that's very mental and not physical, because I just don't have enough awareness. I don't have enough invigoration in order to bring my brain into gear.
Right.
If I'm overly aroused, and this almost always is the byproduct of caffeine. If I'm over aroused, then I can't sit still and therefore I can't focus. So there is a sweet spot in there. And I think to some degree, that's what Indel is trying to do. Because if you go to their deep focus mode, you can adjust the beats and the brightness, and you can try to get to that point where it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's where I need to be.
Right.
So we think we do that incredibly well in NeuroTrainer. I mean, we demonstrated it over and over again. So what we do is we put people in an environment and then we actually start to put them under stress. So for instance, in Gust, which is our real-time reaction trainer, we start throwing things at you, right? And so you start catching them and you're doing some hand-eye coordination. Just the motor activation alone is starting to increase your arousal.
Right.
But then we start throwing bombs at you. And the whole reason we throw bombs at you is because they're annoying. And so they start to hit people. And I always say this, it's great. I get athletes, special forces operators in the headset. And I say, okay, look, what's going to happen? You're going to be catching these objects. And now we're going to shoot these bombs at you. The bombs come really fast. You have to dodge the bombs. They're like, yeah, not a problem. I'm like, well, it is a problem.
Yeah.
Because actually our algorithms are faster than you.
Right.
Because they're thinking human physics, not virtual physics.
Yeah.
And so the trick here is we're going to get to slow the bombs down if we maintain the right vigilance. We can come back to this idea of task switching and how we focus our attention. But our goal here is for actually to start hitting people with these bombs. Because as soon as you start hitting them with their bombs, guess what happens? Their arousal level goes up.
Right.
And you're getting haptic feedback and it's like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
So the brain produces norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is the first step in getting into a truly focused state. So the brain produces norepinephrine. This is what we're trying to get from caffeine. And we'll come back to why caffeine isn't always the right choice for
Mm-hmm.
reasons you already know. Then we're going to give you a complex task, a complex visual tracking task, a complex motor coordination task, because the brain in response is going to produce acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter of focus. And then our goal is to make it just fun enough so that you have a little dopamine in there, so that you're not totally overwhelmed. And that is the focus cocktail: norepinephrine, acetylcholine, and dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can add that to your system, if we can do 5 minutes of priming on the front end, I almost guarantee you that we can shorten that ramp up time for how long it takes you to feel like you're in full focus.
Yeah.
Does that all make sense?
Yeah, so much sense. There's so many ways I want to go with this now. It's
Well, let's talk about your feelings first, Jeremy.
So you mentioned something I think that's interesting to me. You know, I said it takes me a long time to get into work.
Takes the average person 20 minutes to get back into a state of focus.
So let's talk about task switching just for a second there, just to touch on that. I think distraction is obviously the enemy of everything we're talking about here.
So is fatigue.
So yes, and multitasking.
Same thing. And task switching and multitasking, fundamentally the same process.
Yeah, which also known as distraction.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. Like the ability to multitask or to task switch. People think they're really good at it.
Yeah.
But mostly we're not, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the most of the nomenclature these days talks about task switching. The idea being that the brain really, so there are very few cases where the brain can do two things at the same time. So let's do an example of where the brain can do two things at the same time. So if you're driving, this is something people notice all the time, right? You're driving a route you're familiar with. And then you can take a phone call and you think, oh yeah, I can focus on both of these things.
Yeah.
Well, the familiarity is what allows you to get from point A to point B without dying. Right. If you try to do that, and I've had this happen to me and maybe it's happened to you. I travel for work in an area I'm not familiar with. And I'm on a call, and then suddenly I realize I just made a wrong turn.
Absolutely.
There it goes. I can either have the conversation or I can get lost or crash, but I suddenly can't do both at the same time.
Well, and my thing is, I will show up at a destination that I actually wasn't going to.
I wondered why you kept on coming to my house. So task switching has its merits, and it's a thing, but it's almost always, here's what we know. We know, number one, you really can only task switch effectively when the base task is something we're incredibly familiar with. You could probably wash the dishes and have a conversation. You can chew gum and do something else at the same time. But if you increase the challenge of that secondary task, things are going to fall apart very quickly. We also know that the more tasks that you switch between, the lower your overall performance becomes, unless you train to be able to task switch at that level. And so we believe, NeuroTrainer believes, if NeuroTrainer has a consciousness, that task switching is a trainable skill. But what we've generally seen as we track users over time against the fundamental cognitive skills that we track and improve, task switching is the last to move. It is probably the hardest to train.
And that's assuming we're training it.
That's assuming you're training.
Which most people are not, right?
So, no, you are. You're just training it backwards.
Right.
And I think this gets at the point of a lot of what we're talking about. So we're always training our brains. So let's clear the board here for a moment. I mentioned neuroplasticity earlier. I want to make sure, I assume everybody knows what it means, but I don't all the time. So very briefly, neuroplasticity is this principle that the brain is constantly adapting, constantly changing, and that it's always doing this. Now, it's interesting because I think we really take it for granted in our society today. But 25 years ago, when neuroscience was very, very new, it was believed that by the time the male of the species got to about age 25, the brain was locked and loaded, and there was very little going on in terms of adaptation. Seems totally counterintuitive today, right? How did people recover from strokes? How did people learn languages later in life? Regardless. So neuroplasticity is a thing. We know that. It's harder to access the older you are.
Mm-hmm.
When you're very young, you have a very neuroplastic brain, and it really does become harder, not impossible, after the age of 25. So neuroplasticity, we leverage neuroplasticity, this ability to train and modify your brain. What's interesting, though, is we're always training our attention. And I think we just don't think about how we're training our attention.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned we now work from high school all the way through to Department of Defense. I have this opportunity that I get when I'm in front of high school students. I love going to high school, and I'll get in front of, say, 100 kids, young adults, and I get introduced, and everybody has no idea who I am or what I do, and I'll say, okay, I'm here to talk about NeuroTrainer, but let's just start off by talking about your brain, and does anybody know what neuroplasticity is? And I sort of check. I say, okay, how many of you train your brains every day? And occasionally somebody will raise their hands. Occasionally I'll get a high school student raise their hand. Oh, what do you do? I meditate. Oh, that's fantastic. Good for you. What do you do? I read, which I think is really interesting because that is a good example of training your attention.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit down. I'm going to read a book for 30 minutes. I'm not going to check my phone, and I'm not going to do anything else. That is practicing sustained attention. 100 kids, 95 of them don't raise their hands. I say, oh, that's really interesting. Okay. How many of you own one of these? And I hold up my smartphone. And they know they're caught. And they're great. They play along really well. And they all start looking at each other and they all raise their hands. Yeah. I say, okay, let's talk about your phone and what you do on your phone. So the narrative that we're getting to here is the top 3 things that kids do with their phone: text, social media, and number 3,
email,
games,
video, games, right?
Games, yeah. So those 3. So we're going to focus on social media. TikTok claims that the average TikTok user is on their platform for what amount of time per day?
3 hours?
3 hours.
Right.
3 hours of their day.
Right.
Then when you say this in front of a bunch of high school students, they don't blink.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say it in front of a bunch of adults and they're horrified. They're like, 3 hours, and they don't blink. So what platforms do you use? Fortunately, Instagram is still the most popular platform in high school because it works for my narrative. So I say, okay, Instagram. Who owns Instagram? Facebook owns Instagram, right? Who owns Facebook? Mark Zuckerberg. It's good to have a villain in your story. Okay, so Mark Zuckerberg owns Instagram. Tell me, when you get onto Instagram and you're sitting here and you're surfing and you're feeling good, and then you're feeling bad, and then you're feeling good, and then you're feeling bad, and you're in endless scroll, and you're paying attention to anything for about 10 or 15 seconds. And you do this for a half hour, and they kind of giggle because a half hour is not long enough.
Right.
And you're finished, 45 minutes. How do you feel? And they are so honest. And the words that come out every single time from the audience are tired, cranky, irritated. No one says, I feel alert, responsive, and serene.
Right.
And I said, well, guess what? That's because Mark Zuckerberg's leveraging neuroplasticity.
Right.
Mark Zuckerberg has a team of neuroscientists who are figuring out how to adapt the algorithm to capture and parse your attention into these very short, very delusional moments. And they know why. And I said, why? They want more information about us so they can get us to buy more stuff. I said, great. I said, so you're surrendering the training of your brain to Mark Zuckerberg.
Well, and that's the really interesting thing, isn't it? Whatever you spend a lot of time doing is training you. If you sit a lot, you train to that level. If you read a book for 4 hours, you focus on that one thing, you train up to that level. And I guess this is the same response. You're training to the level of that thing that you're paying attention to.
You're training to that level, but you're also surrendering your emotional control but this is where social media becomes insidious because nothing there is real, right? You're just reinforcing how you're not good enough. You're reinforcing how everybody else is cooler. You're overtraining your dopamine system for this next little rush or little disappointment. So the net of that is, I always ask, I say, so basically NeuroTrainer's an opportunity. Here's a tool set. I'm going to give you a new tool set. This tool set will let you train your brain in alignment with your goals.
Yeah.
Because the tool set you're using isn't. Because is that how you want to feel before you walk out on the court? Irritated, tired? Is that how you want to feel before you go take an important test? And I
Right.
think as a parent, is that how you want to feel before you sit down for dinner with your parents, assuming that's still a thing?
Right.
So it's interesting. We are facing a struggle because everyone is competing for our attention. We know this. We live in the economy of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And social media is not going away, and the algorithms are incredibly powerful. So the solution in schools is no more phones in schools. And there's some
Right.
mixed signals about how effective that is. What frustrates me is we're not explaining, I'm going to borrow from Simon Sinek here. There's no real explanation of the why.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Right.
now as a CEO, I have to look at the next generation of employees and think, can they sit down and do work?
Mm-hmm.
I need you to sit down and crank on this project for 3 hours.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that skill still exists, except for a very small
Mm-hmm.
percentage of young people.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's slowly moving throughout our society.
Do you
That
think
was my
that this is
soapbox moment. I'm going to step off my soapbox now.
No, it's such an important part of this conversation, because one of the things I want to talk about is neurodivergence, ADHD, autism spectrum, um, nervous system sensitivity, all these things that challenge focus and attention.
Mm.
And so I want to understand a little bit better. I described, okay, I struggle with ADHD. It takes me a long time. You say, well, that's just human. Where do some of those differences show up? And do you think that what we're seeing here is more ADHD, or is it a move towards this social media quick attention grab dopamine system? Like, are we being trained in a way
Yeah.
that we can't focus, or are we just having more diagnoses of
Yeah.
ADHD?
And the answer is
'Cause we're
probably
testing it.
yes. The answer is probably yes. So I, again, I'll my disclaimer here, not a doctor,
Yeah.
only play one on Zoom calls. But I speak to a lot of PhDs and doctors. I think the answer
Yeah.
is yes. I know that the DSM diagnosis has changed, and that as a friend of mine said, if you put anybody through the right test now, they're going to show up on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Because of the way we've retrained our attention. Sort of this
Sure.
fragmented attention gives us symptomology. So whether or not you clinically have ADHD, a disproportionate amount of the population shows symptoms that resemble ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see that in my son as a data set of one, I'm going to come back to this whole arousal question. Because with my son, from a very young age, he learned how to manage his need for arousal in order to be able to get into a state of focus that was comfortable for him. And you know this, and I know this, a lot of kids discover that the best way to get there is actual physical activity.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a disproportionate number of tremendously talented athletes and tier 1 operators who have wicked ADHD.
Right.
They do best in the heat of the moment, tons of pressure, very high level of arousal, so that they can bring all that energy forward.
Mm-hmm.
But you ask them to sit still and read a book, and that's where they're not comfortable.
See, that's me. Like, if it's game 7 and the guy's just been hit in the face with a puck and like had his face exploded, like I'm like cool as a cucumber. I'm like, yeah, marshaling everybody. Hey, calm down. It's all right. We'll be fine. Talking to the GM. But for me to sit down and like write the training programs at my desk, I'm just like, oh my God, it's so hard.
Well, so yeah, I get that. And I think more and more people feel that way, honestly.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know what so I experiment, I did biohacking before biohacking was a popular term.
Right.
If we come back to this whole concept of arousal, sitting at your desk has zero arousal. So even if you prime, whether it's NeuroTrainer or something else, and we'll talk about other ways of priming, because obviously I don't expect everybody to run out, get a meta headset, form a sports team, and then call us. Not realistic. I joined the Marines just so I could use NeuroTrainer.
Yeah.
But when we think about, I got to prime, I got to get into this proper state of arousal, you probably have, the science is pretty clear. You're lucky if you get 90 minutes of really acute high level focus. Okay, so that's part of the whole Pomodoro method, right? You know that there's a limited amount of time. We also know, and Gloria Mark has done a lot of this work on attention, that if you break your attention during that time, it will take up to 20 minutes to get back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have that 90-minute window and you break it, now you've lost 20. And so you're already struggling with a very limited set here. I think most people are so prone to distraction that they never get into the deep state of focus.
Mm-hmm.
You're structuring it such that you can. What I would suggest, because it's all about you in this conversation for a moment.
Yeah, exactly.
What I would
we're not even going to publish this episode.
What I would suggest you play with is don't limit yourself by saying for those 90 minutes, you have to be still.
Right.
Because stillness doesn't resonate with your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So behind this wall used to be a dining room. I converted it into a gym about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did it completely change my adherence to my own training program, but it completely changed my relationship to incidental fitness. So I'll say, okay, I'm going to work on something for an hour, but about every 15 minutes, I get up and I do a set of farmer carries up and down my hallway for 2 minutes. And then I sit back down.
Right.
And it enhances my focus.
Yeah.
I'll do a set of kettlebell swings. I'll do a set of pull-ups. So physical activation also helps to sustain focus, especially for those who are prone to, okay, I have sort of this hypervigilance. Now you're asking me to stand still.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did that make sense?
A ton of sense, and really interesting. You know, we've had a number of conversations around these exercise snacks.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If we're in our 90-minute window and I go and I do my set of kettlebell swings, because same deal, like in the bedroom next door to me, we set up as a gym.
Mm-hmm.
I go and do my kettlebell swings. Is that a break in my focus, or is that an enhancement in my focus?
Yeah, I think it's a question of intent, and it's a question of control. So if you deliberately say, I'm just going to get up for a minute, I'm going to go do the swings, I'm going to come right back, I think you're going to find it's an extension of your focus.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're going to find you actually see your focus elevate slightly. The risk is you go to do the kettlebell swings and then you think, well, while I'm here.
And I see a butterfly out the window and off
right?
I go.
Or whatever it is, while I'm here. Like it's interesting. I work from home and it's taken a couple of years for me and my wife, because she's home all the time as well, to get to a point where she knows just because I'm home doesn't mean I'm available. And so when I'm in a state and I don't want to put a sign on the door, I don't want to have like an on air, sign, although that would be kind of fun and cool.
Actually, yeah.
And now she knows when I'm head down, I'm in a state of focus. And then if I step out and she'll talk to me, I'll be like, no, it's not, and she'll pick up on it and then I can come right back. So I think it's contextual, Jeremy. I don't think it's the action. I think it's the context and it's the intent that allows us to stay in a focused state.
That's fascinating, because Michelle and I since we started this business, we are at home. A lot of my work is virtual. Michelle works in the business. We do our podcast remotely. So we barely leave the house. And I think both of us are really bad at that, of just sort of walking into one another's environment. And, if we have a question or just want to be distracted ourselves, we go and distract the other one.
Right.
So that's for us, I think, a big challenge. And I think an important point, I've sort of taken the Pomodoro of the 20 minutes, take a 5-minute break, 20 minutes, take a 5-minute break. And I might reward myself by logging on and scrolling on the internet, or logging onto Instagram. And so actually thinking I'm taking a break, but really it's not a break in the right way.
No, it's
in
not
order
a break
to
in
prime
the right
for,
As a matter of fact, when we work with clients and we talk about cognitive priming. So quick, gratuitous plug. We work with the LA Galaxy. We've been working with them for a couple of years. As I like to say, we were largely responsible for them winning the world championships when they did, and we have taken no responsibility for their last season.
Absolutely not.
Michael Rabaska, who's the director of cognitive performance there, is a great partner, great friend. He is the only person who has that title in the whole MLS. So it also speaks to, from a sports perspective, how they're still trying to figure this out. The fact that that
Sure.
is the only soccer team that has a dedicated cognitive division is interesting. So
I would suggest that there aren't many of those in global elite sport, never mind the MLS.
no, a bit more in Europe for football, for soccer, but you're correct. Yeah, you're correct. But it's interesting. So Michael wanted to see subjective data, how effective is priming. So he had his athletes come in and answer 2 questions. They rated themselves on tiredness and preparedness to play. And then they primed in the headset, and then they answered the same questions again. And he was able to demonstrate consistently a 31% decrease in tiredness and a 29% increase in preparedness to play, self-reported, which are, I think, pretty substantial changes. Those are good numbers.
Yeah.
And these are young people. So if we can impact young athletes, it's in some ways much easier to impact a CEO, somebody who's more an executive athlete.
Yeah.
But more interesting, we had an opportunity to work with a tier 1 SOCOM group.
Yeah.
And they also, young tactical athletes, they primed before going into shoot house scenarios. And they had 2 slightly different questions. It was preparedness and activation, and the scale was different. It was 0 to 5 rather. But as a whole cohort, we were able to move them from a 4.2 to a 4.8. And you don't get much better than a 4.8. So it's real. Like, it's noticeable. That's what's so important, is that, people who are not daily meditators and do body scans like myself will notice, okay, if you do the right thing from a priming perspective, yes, I am more prepared. I'm less tired. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So the power of priming. If you can't get to a headset, what do you do? Well, some of the same techniques that we're talking about for keeping you active during your focus period are very similar. Short bouts of physical activity help a lot, again, on the arousal curve.
Right.
So even taking a brisk walk is so popular these days. And it gets very weird when things that should never become this popular become this popular. So walking has become so popular. I don't know if you see this now, but now there's this bizarre Tai Chi walking thing on Instagram.
I haven't seen
YouTube. Oh, it's so bad. It's all this AI generated, Asian ripped men in their 50s who became muscle bound by Tai Chi walking.
Oh, well, if that's all we had to do,
all
I
it
wish I'd
takes.
known.
But walking is very effective for this. That science has been around for, I'm trying to think, 30 years ago when I was at Rancho La Puerta, a destination spa in Mexico. The first fitness spa in North America, Rancho La Puerta, founded in 1940. I was talking about mood manipulation by walking. And I'm trying to remember the researcher who brought this into popularity. But if you take a 10-minute brisk walk, it fundamentally shifts neurochemicals in your brain, shifts your awareness, again, gets you a little bit more into optic flow. Another good example of a priming exercise. So I think that part of the strategy that you're deploying is structure, which is great. And now you want to start layering in a little bit more, okay, but how do I actually feel? Because you can have all the structure in the world, but if you're too tired or you're too anxious, you're still not in that zone, that focus zone. So you need to get into that focus zone.
Yeah.
Another thing to consider, and I think this one's really hard. It gets a little complicated. We all understand the concept of circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
We all know that when we start really understanding our circadian rhythms and adjusting our sleep patterns against our circadian rhythms, we get better rest.
Yeah.
I know you talked about sleep before. We have to talk about it whenever we talk about the brain, because fundamentally, I have brain fog. I can't focus. Which is much more common, by the way. It's much more common to hear adults say, I have brain fog and I have struggling to focus, than I'm just too scattered.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, we're going to go to the same principles that you've discussed in other shows. How well do you sleep? How consistently do you sleep? Do you get enough deep sleep? Because if you don't do those things, you're not in the game.
Right.
And then you have to be hydrated. So we're checking all these boxes. This concept of throughout the day, you have peaks and troughs called ultradian rhythms is quite interesting. This idea that we all go through 90-minute cycles, and that you probably only have one point in your day where you have natural peak focus and natural peak arousal.
Oh, interesting.
And if you can step back and kind of look at your day and figure out when that is and schedule the most important activities in that window, now you're maximizing your natural systems arousal patterns against what you're trying to do in your profession.
So let's dig into that a little bit around structure then. As you said, everybody can't work with NeuroTrainer. I think they should.
Not yet.
I think they should. It's amazing. How should we structure our day? How should we structure our environment in order for us to optimize? You mentioned briefly there, just like aligning for that one period during the day. But what about the rest of the day? What if we can't do that? My schedule is very intermittent with working with clients online.
Sure.
So my focus blocks move. It's not at the same time every day. It might even move during the day. So how are we looking at our day where we can optimize for this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I don't think there's right answers. I think we can just talk about some best practices. So some of the obvious ones are that you're doing are controlling your workspace, but physically controlling your workspace as well. If for the times that you want to focus, is your workspace completely clear? Or are there things in front of you that are distracting? And it's funny because I have a tendency to have a lot of things on my desk. And then when I clear them all away, I actually notice the difference.
Right.
It's just dramatic, right? And it may not be comfortable, but it's dramatically better. The same thing with my office. Once every Sunday, clean my office, get as much of the physical distractions out of the way. I think, and you've said this on other podcasts, you can have a plan for a workout, and then you actually have to see how you feel, and then you have to adjust accordingly. So I'm a coffee fan. I start every day with an espresso. Yeah. My wife actually bought me a manual espresso press several months ago, and I'm so addicted to it. I've always been a coffee drinker, but it's the whole ritual of it.
Yeah.
And I do notice, so I get up earlier than everybody else in the house, that the anticipation of it is the beginning of me starting to ramp up in terms of awareness and cognition. So I think we all have these tools. So caffeine is one of them. And it's a useful tool. And I think the research is very clear. Drinking caffeine is fine unless you have some sort of medical condition that suggests it's contrary. Knowing when to stop is more important.
Yeah.
And so stopping your caffeine by either noon or 2 is my cutoff point.
Yeah.
I found that works well for me. And so time blocking, you talk about Pomodoro. The other technique is time blocking, really trying to map. This is when I know I'm most alert. This is when I know I need a reprieve. You don't want to schedule a client when you typically take a nap.
Yeah.
So I know you're a nap fan. Winston Churchill took naps during the war. Now, granted, he also drank a bottle of scotch and smoked 6 cigars every day.
Yeah, so me too. Who doesn't?
He wasn't the epitome of health, but this idea of there should be certain aspects of your schedule that you protect 100%.
Yeah.
Because you know that if you don't, you're surrendering your productivity, but not just your productivity, your success for that day to your schedule. And I think that's a challenge we all face.
Yeah.
The idea of scheduling your priorities the day before, I think, is another one of these. It's incredibly critical because the challenge with distraction is it's distracting us away from what we think is important or what we've identified as important.
Yeah.
And if we don't identify it, then we're just chasing distractions all day long. Email is the worst example ever, right? It's like, oh yeah, what's going on? Oh, I'll check my email. Okay. You just ruin the next hour easily.
Yeah.
If you do
now
that.
You've got a whole list of other people's emergencies.
Yeah. And then if you didn't set your priorities for the day. So I change systems all the time. My current system is I just keep one of these. I'm a big notebook guy. Tiny little notebook.
Yeah.
Fits in my pocket. Before I go to bed every night, I review my top priorities and I try to keep the list as short as possible. And then the next day I come back to this over and over again. Am I still on task? Am I still on focus? So I think a lot of these structural things help quite a bit. And if you set a schedule and you block your schedule, you have to stick to it. I think the biggest issue we run into is we surrender to the environment instead of structuring our environment.
Yeah. that is something that I've struggled with for a long time, is the ability to stick to the things I put on my schedule.
Sure.
And seeing them as not optional, right? If it's just for me and nobody's really following up with me, you know, I might drift, and maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. And so that's something, especially since coming out and working for ourselves, no one's checking our homework.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Right. Yeah. And so it's like, you learn pretty quickly that someone is checking your homework. It's the bank manager.
There's always somebody checking your homework.
Yeah. So, you know, I think that is, it's almost a learned skill. It's certainly a practice and a discipline that I've had to get into, because in sport for 20 years, I was told where to be, what to eat, what to wear.
Right.
Like every hour of the day I knew, and it worked with my need to move, because you were in a different part of the building. You had practice. Then I would sit and do my reports. Then I would be back out, and you're always around people. So that was sort of how my brain was trained. And now to be sat where it's just me and Michelle, and it's, you know, just the house, and I'm sitting at my desk, that it was a challenging transition from a mental, emotional standpoint.
Well, it sounds like it still is. I mean, from what you described earlier. So again, if I'm offering maybe solicited advice, I think you should actually look back at that and identify what elements of that can you reintroduce to get back into that environment that you are very comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, this idea of working from home is really interesting. The fact that we spend more time with our families, great. The fact that we, you know, have the ability to control our environment is great. The fact that we're not interacting with as many people in a physical way, not great. You know, structurally, socially, not great. From getting back to the sort of the theme of focus and attention, and noticing when you're focused and when you're not. Do you have a meditation practice?
It's one of the things I've struggled to set up.
Okay.
It's one of the things I know I need. And
so I'm taking that as a no.
That is a no. that's a way of admitting that
that was a noble dodge.
Yeah, exactly.
So I believe that a basic mindfulness practice should be a essential tool in the toolkit of focus and attention.
Yeah.
Full stop. And I think it should be attainable. It should be easy. I think we don't have to go deep down this rabbit hole, but I think people misunderstand still what meditation is, even with all the popularity of it.
Yeah.
And I think people start meditation practices and they quit because I think the number one reason is probably they don't feel like they're good at it, because we're such a metric-driven culture. Okay, I'm going to sit. I'm going to be aware of my breath. Am I doing well? No, I'm not doing well. I'm distracted. Oh my God, I'm always distracted. Like it's a freak out session.
Yeah.
And spending the time to get through that adaptive process of meta awareness, where you realize that the process is just what it is. It's just noticing you're distracted. And really the trick here and the gift is noticing you're distracted and then letting go of that distraction. And then coming back to what you were doing. And if you think about it, I think part of the reason this is so important is because in some ways that is practicing concentration. And we don't practice focus. We don't practice concentration. So when you say I sit down and I work, that's like playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the practice.
Yeah.
So I used to teach yoga in another life. And it was I love teaching moderately good yoga practice physically, but love teaching and sharing the practice. And you sort of get drawn into the social aspect of it. And it's a wonderful space to be. But as my teacher always told me, I would tell my students, by the way, what we're doing here is not practice. You're taking a class.
Right.
And in the class, you're so focused on what I'm saying that you're missing the practice. The practice is what's happening with you, what's happening with your body, what's happening with your attention while you do these physical asana, these physical poses. So in addition to what you're doing in class, you got to go practice. And even if it's only for 10 minutes, 3 times a week, That's where all the richness is. And so I think part of what we're missing is, what is your practice of attention?
Yeah. It's really interesting, because the thing that working with my therapist, who is a long time meditator, and doing my practice intermittently, it has allowed me to have those check-ins with myself of when I distract myself. And there's a pretty consistent theme of when I go to click on a different website, or when I pick up my phone and I'm in a work block, it's generally because I get stuck on something. And so just having that awareness in the moment, like, why am I doing this right now?
And then you're choosing to do it instead of doing it reactively.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I don't necessarily have to not do it, but I have to be aware that I'm doing it because I'm avoiding this thing that I'm finding difficult right now.
Yes. And I think that is, so a completely different way to approach this in some ways is, like, if I want to be a focus master, because we live in the age of hyper optimization of everything, right? Monk mode, all this crazy stuff. But what are the tools that are essential? And there needs to be a practice. You need to have a practice. So I think mindfulness has just proven itself over time to be one of these time-tested practices. I used to practice Tai Chi. I think Tai Chi is very interesting. I think for people who say, well, I'm not good at sitting still. Like, I have ADHD, therefore I'm not good at sitting still. Then try a meditative or a contemplative practice that also has you moving. And whether that's walking meditation, because just the physical activity of becoming more conscious of the walking itself, or any kind of the Eastern Tai Chi Qigong practices, the universality of all of them is you're just discovering what's happening in the existing moment. You're learning how to bring your attention to what is happening in the existing moment. That's a focus practice.
Right.
And if you don't get into sports, because I think that's where most people think they develop their focus skills. If you don't get into sports, there is no focus practice in somebody's life. And then even when you're in sports, we get back to the very beginning of the conversation, I'm not sure it really transfers.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Oh man, I can lock in on the ball, right? But can you write an email?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Well, Noah, as we come up on time here, you've listened to the show, so we do 3 takeaways every week.
Favorite book, favorite movie. Oh no, that's a different show. Sorry.
That's right. So if our listeners are wanting to build a practice around improving their cognitive performance and building their focus, where would you start? What are 3 things that we can do if we don't necessarily have access to NeuroTrainer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm going to start. I'm going to expand the question slightly. So it's not just, because as we've talked about, it's about the long game. It's not just the short game.
Yeah.
So I not only want to improve my focus, but I want to make sure that I can do this for a long time. Right? I don't want to focus for a week. I want to focus when I'm 80.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, we're going to start with exercise, because cardiovascular fitness is the foundation. It is the one lever that moves this world. Right. So starting to move, getting to the right level of cardiovascular fitness will have a direct impact on your cognitive function and your focus. I know when I train consistently, I have better focus on demand. Full stop.
Yeah.
Full stop. From there, we're going to have to go to sleep and rest, and not to turn it into a podcast on sleep and rest. And there's so much information that's readily available. So I've kept my hands out of camera, but I wear both an Aura and a Whoop.
Yeah.
And I do this largely because, depending on who I'm talking to in the military, they use 1 or 2 of these devices.
Yeah.
I went through a period of very poor sleep, and nothing else worked. You talk about not being able to get into a state of focus, not being able to sustain focus. And as I say, the information's readily available in terms of sleep hygiene. I would say the most important aspect of it, though, is consistency.
Yeah.
100%. You have to find out what helps you get a good night's rest, and you need to maintain consistency regardless of what's going on. My family knows it. my routine is not their routine. I start dimming the lights before they do. And it doesn't matter. Like, this works for me, and I provide, and I'm at I'm the tip of the spear. This is what I have to do. So physical activity, mostly cardiovascular fitness, rest and sleep. And then the third, I'm just going to bring us back to this last piece of the conversation, which is, I think it's really important that you develop a practice.
Yeah.
So arguably, I think NeuroTrainer is a practice. I use it as a tool.
Absolutely.
As a practice. Yeah. Meditation is a practice. Tai Chi is a practice. Kettlebell swings are a practice. I'm a Pavel fan. When I train, are you training and are you always listening to music? Do you need that level of stimulation? Or can you use that physical training as an awareness exercise? And so whether it's very much the Jon Kabat-Zinn, wherever you go, there you are kind of principle.
Yeah.
Define and develop a practice for developing focus that isn't your job. It's not when you're hosting a podcast. It's not when you're writing an important paper. Take the pressure off. Figure out a way to develop a practice that's disentangled from all of that. Yeah. And then you'll be able to notice what focus feels like. This is what success feels like. And then you're in a position, as you say, to make a better decision where, I'm going to check my email. Why am I doing that? Do I really need to do that? No, that's not where I want to be right now. I'm going to take a breath. Going to do a couple farmers carries. I'm going to go back to what I was doing.
Yeah. No, I think those points are so valuable and really just so aligned with essentially every conversation we've had on this podcast.
Yeah.
This
universal principles of wellness.
They really are. There isn't one expert we've had on that we've asked that question that said, what'll really put you over the edge is this supplement. Why am I
creatine, of course. Right.
Right,
600 milligrams of creatine a day. Yeah.
Exactly. Just buy
3 times your body weight in protein. And
and we can't talk about the brain unless we're talking about sleep. Like there's just, I have these conversations with people I'm rehabbing. If they're not sleeping, they're like, don't go take a multivitamin because you're falling asleep in the afternoon. You just told me you're getting 4 hours of sleep, and I think the other underrated part of the brain, I've done an episode on this and given talks on this, is the impact of exercise on the brain. It's interesting. People talk about the brain like it's separate from the body.
Right.
But it's surprising that it is actually inside our body.
It actually controls the body. It
has the same blood supply.
It's the CPU of the body.
Yeah. But every movement you do is done by the body. So the brain has to activate and sequence all of those muscles when you move. So we're demanding the energy supplies, the energy systems of the brain. We're training the brain when we move. When we release IGF-1 and VEGF, which proliferates blood vessels, when we testosterone, growth hormone, all of these things have direct impacts on the physical structures of the brain when we sleep and when we exercise. And so I think all of these factors, and then along with the meditation, which again trains the physical structures of the brain, I just think that it's an area that you've made so clear today. I'm looking at it thinking like, well, duh, like why can't I focus? Because I'm not doing those things. I'm going to take up the challenge that I'm going to commit to my meditation practice.
Oh, good.
Michelle bought me actually a new meditation cushion for Christmas.
Oh, sweet.
And I haven't used it yet. And so I'm going to commit to it.
Well, then don't do it alone. There are a lot of very good apps. I happen to like Waking Up. I like Sam Harris's app.
Right.
I want to land one more thought before we wrap in all of this, because we're joking about hyper optimization and even I hear it a little bit in your own narrative, Jeremy. You're obviously very self-aware, but there's always a level of self-judgment in all of this.
Yeah. Right.
And I think the other piece is if I want to be better at being a human, which includes focus and it includes all these other pieces. You need to move, You need to fuel. Like we know these physical components, but the idea that you also have to really understand grace for yourself, that wherever you are right now is where you are. And that's absolutely fine. You know, like we're such a judgment driven culture. We're such a comparison driven culture that we almost don't have a chance to be successful until we step back and just say, yes, I'm grateful for where I am. So the other element in all of that, I'm in 2026, I started journaling every day, which I haven't done in a while. Another great anchor point in terms of pulling all these pieces together. Take a moment of self-reflection and just know that if you're trying, that's fantastic. You don't have to be an elite athlete. You don't have to be a special forces operator. You don't have to eat 600 milligrams of creatine every day. Figure out where you are, figure out the subtle changes you want to make, and just celebrate them and understand that we're fallible and it's a journey is an important part of that process.
What a powerful message. And I think that comes back to some of that social media message. We actually joked about it before we came on air here, and everybody looks happy and successful and productive. You know, everyone has a morning routine on social media.
Oh yeah. Right.
And you look at, since becoming an entrepreneur, I do judge myself a lot with this focus realm. I look at other people, other entrepreneurs, and I only sleep 2 hours a night and this and that. I'm like, geez, like I would die if I only slept 2 hours tonight. It just would not go well.
Well, if you interviewed everybody else in that person's life, what's the story?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
the footnote there.
If you were actually following them around, right? Like they probably don't.
Well, the footnote there also, if and I'm sure you know this, with sleep deprivation. I mean, sleep deprivation's impact on performance is dramatic, but it's not accurate from a self-reporting standpoint.
Right.
Consistently inaccurate. So you start your performance starts to degrade, but when you're interviewed and you're asked, you're like, no, I'm running on 4 hours of sleep. I'm fine.
I do great.
Yeah. But
no problem.
When you look at the data, you're a wrecking ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Noah, again, thank you so much. This
pleasure.
is the conversation I have been wanting to have on cognitive performance. So I'm very appreciative of your time and your openness to share all of that and love the messaging. So thank you so much again.
Sure. And if anybody wants to reach me, easy to reach me, Noah@neurotrainer.com. Or you can also check out my podcast if you don't mind me throwing a little plug. FocusMatters is the name of my podcast, where we explore the brain and cognition and focus through a broad range of conversations, from neuroscientists to special forces operators to artists and designers. So it's an important conversation that we want more people to be involved in. Right. So thanks for making the time.
All right. Noah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was an incredible episode with Noah Rolland. Here are the 3 key things that you can take away from today's episode. Number 1, build your cardiovascular fitness as the foundation for your focus. Consistent aerobic exercise has a direct impact on cognitive function and your ability to access focus on demand. Number 2, prioritize sleep quality and protect your sleep routine with consistency. Sleep deprivation wrecks focus in ways that most people underestimate and rarely even notice in themselves. Guard your sleep the same way that you guard your training time. Number 3, develop a focused practice that is separate from your work. Meditation, Tai Chi, a mindful training session, or tools like NeuroTrainer. Find something that lets you practice attention without the pressure of performance and build awareness of what focus actually feels like. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave a rating or a review. It makes a real difference in helping us reach more people who could benefit from these conversations. You can stay connected with us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Vitality Collective Performance, where we share additional insights, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. The information shared in this episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your training, recovery, or health practices. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.